Today, I'm answering the 5 most searched questions about renting versus buying in Toronto in 2026. And we're looking at the order of least to most asked questions. Make sure you stick around to the end of the video. That's where I'll break down actual cost scenarios across real life situations for a final verdict. And my answer will definitely surprise you. My name's Jordan Abrams, 9 years in this business. If you're curious, reach out. All my info's down below. Let's get into the video. Question number 1. Should I keep renting and save a bigger down payment instead of buying right now? Well, it really depends on your specific situation. Rents are actually softening in Toronto right now. A 1-bed downtown is around $23.50. It's down from the peak by quite a bit. Something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about renting versus buying is in Toronto, we had a huge influx of newer buildings over the last 5 to 10 years or so. So anything built prior to November 2018 is rent controlled, which means they can only raise it by a couple percentage points every year, your rental cost. Whereas anything built after November 2018 has no rent control. So that means if the market rent suddenly for your unit goes from $2,000 to $3,000, after your lease is up, the landlord can raise that on you, and there's really not much you can do about it except decide to pay it or leave. So that's just a quick aside about your total rental costs, thinking about the long term. Obviously, the main thing is figuring out if it's the right time for you and if buying is actually feasible or not. A big thing to keep in mind as well is if you can rent and save at least 20% down, you do avoid the CMHC insurance as a premium that gets added directly onto your mortgage principal. So let's say you're purchasing a $700,000 home or condo, that's close to $20,000 in a lump sum premium that gets added right onto your mortgage principal. The flip side on that though is every month that you wait, you're also not building equity. You know, your rent just goes to someone else. You're helping them pay off their mortgage and build their equity. And the other big factor is right now in the summer of 2026, Toronto's in one of the most favorable buyers markets that I've seen in my 9 years of doing this in the GTA. So you do really have to weigh those pros and cons. I would say if you're in a position to buy, even if you can't get quite to that 20% down mark, a lot of my clients over the years have done 5% or 10% and still come out way ahead from buying over the long term. Question number 2. Is the double land transfer tax you pay in Toronto really that bad? The short answer is yes, and people consistently underestimate how much it is. So in Toronto, it's the only place in Canada that I'm aware of that you pay both a provincial and municipal land transfer tax. Definitely nowhere else in Ontario do you pay both. And this can be as crazy as hitting the Toronto cutoff between Mississauga and being a couple streets over and buying a place that has only 1 land transfer tax versus 2. And just to put some dollar amounts out there, if we use another $700,000 purchase as an example, you're paying roughly $20,000 to $22,000 in land transfer tax alone. One benefit though that first-time buyers get is they get a combined rebate of up to $8,500, technically $8,475, but that only fully covers homes that are under $370,000, which is almost nothing in Toronto. I just had a call with buyers about this same situation, and we went through and made sure that they knew exactly how much they'd end up paying, but the land transfer tax really does add up more than you'd even expect. So those first 2 questions are really about getting into the Toronto market, but make sure you stick around for question number 5 at the end of the video, because I'm going to go through real life scenarios and the exact costs based on your purchase price, your down payment, and your mortgage rate. Stick around for that. Question number 3. If I rent, am I just throwing money away? I know a lot of us have heard this from our parents' generation. If you're around my age, I'm 36. That generation generally says to a lot of younger people, you know, if you rent, you're just throwing your money away. And the reality in Toronto is that pretty much every single person, myself included, has to rent at some point. And look, that's not to say renting over the long term is terrible or anything. It's just to say that if you want to move out of your parents' house and you want to live on your own, you're going to have to bite the bullet and rent at some point. And just because you own something, it's not like some of that money doesn't get thrown away either. Especially early on in a mortgage, roughly 60 to 65% of your payment is interest, not equity. That's not something people talk about that much when they're comparing renting and buying. You're saving on property tax, condo fees, insurance, closing costs, lawyer fees, all that stuff. Another big point for renting is having that life flexibility. Working from home or remotely is super common since COVID. So I know a lot of people who just like being able to rent in one place, live there for a couple of years, and then kind of rinse and repeat and explore different places around the world. Pretty cool option that renting allows that buying makes more difficult. In my opinion though, and I'm a realtor, obviously I believe in real estate, I own real estate myself. Over the long term, if you look at the charts, if you look at the numbers, buying in Toronto generally outperforms renting by quite a lot. If we're talking just from a financial standpoint of building wealth over long periods of time. Now, there's always the university cases that come up and the studies on, well, what if I rent and I get a cheap rent and I invest in the stock market and I put away all my savings into a high performing market or an ETF or something like that, and look at that over a 30-year period, can't I come out ahead? And the answer is complicated. In some cases, they found that you can, but I think realistically, the percentage of people that applies to who are actually disciplined enough to save exactly as much as they can every month and put it into an investment portfolio over such a long time frame is probably just about under 5% of people, if we're being honest. The big advantage of buying is that it forces you to essentially save your money through equity in what will likely be your largest financial asset of your life, your home. And in Toronto, I've seen this play out so many times, dozens of times over the years, with people who bought, and owned a house for 20 or 30 years, and then they go to retire and they downsize, they buy a condo or they move outside the city, and they generally have a pretty big lump sum of cash on top of that they can use to help with their retirement. So I'm not a financial advisor. This isn't retirement or financial advice, but historically in Toronto, people have done quite well by just buying, paying their mortgage payment every month, and then in 20 or 30 years, holding the asset and being quite far ahead. And it's been a really amazing wealth building tool for people. In some cases, if you look at year-over-year returns in areas of Toronto, the equity you're building can be over 6 figures. So what I like to think of it as sometimes to visualize it is, it's almost like if you buy in the right pocket at the right time, you have someone else working for you, making over $100,000 a year and just banking that money while you're just living and paying your mortgage. It really has been like that in Toronto in the past. Question number 4, how long do I actually have to stay in Toronto for buying to make sense versus renting? And this is a really important question because just like any investment, if you buy stocks or if you invest in GICs, or even if you keep your money in an interest-bearing savings account, buying real estate is an investment, and it's kind of like putting a lot of your investment in one stock. Sure, that stock can go up, or the house can go up quite a lot in a short period of time, but generally to do well in any investment, you have to be the one who controls when you're selling. You can't be forced to sell in, let's say, a down market, because then you could come out behind, and we've seen lots of examples of that popping up. We had the peak of housing prices in 2022, and since then we've had people who have been forced to sell, defaulted on their mortgage, really unfortunate situations that's cost them to lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. So just like any financial asset, the main thing is making sure you're prepared to buy and that you're going to be able to hold it for at least, I'd say, a 5 to 7 year period, and make sure that you control that time for selling and it's not controlled by the market. The other thing to consider is closing costs, land transfer tax. They can be 25, 30, 40,000 more depending on, or way more depending on your purchase price. You know, if you're selling a place at the same time, you also have to factor in commission for selling your home, right? In Ontario, only the sellers generally pay the real estate commission. That's usually about 5% of your sale price. So moving can be quite expensive in Toronto. You do generally want to stay put for a little while when you're buying. So I'd say if you have a time horizon of having to sell under 3 years, renting probably makes the most sense for you. You know, rent, try and save your money, figure out where you want to be long term. But if you have at least a 5-year time horizon or more, buying generally wins out over renting. And I hope you can tell I'm pretty enthused about this. I started my career doing rentals, so I've had this question asked so many times. I'm really happy to be able to give my opinion on it. There's nothing I love more than helping people figure out where they should be in Toronto, whether you're buying, selling, or renting. So pause the video, write down my number, and reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help you out in whatever way I can. All right, question number 5. The most asked question when it comes to renting versus buying in Toronto. Question number 5. What does it actually cost per month to own versus rent in Toronto right now? So I think the easiest way to visualize this is actually talk about 2 specific scenarios that I find encompass a large portion of the buyer base. Let's talk about scenario number 1, which is if you're buying a $550,000 condo, a 1-bed plus den. There's a lot of them in the market, really good resale older buildings right now you can get for that price. Let's assume you have a 30-year mortgage amortization and your rate is about 4%. So your mortgage is going to come out to about $2,350 per month. Your condo fees are likely about $500 to $600. Property tax about $200 to $250, and insurance about $100 a month. That brings your total ownership cost for the condo at $550,000 to about $3,200 a month. And if we were looking at the equivalent rent for that same type of unit, probably be about $2,600 a month right now in Toronto if you're looking at parking as well for that unit. I was helping someone look for a rental recently, and some of them were as high as $2,800, $2,900. So the gap in renting versus owning could be as little as just about $500 to $700 a month, which I think is much closer than people realize. You can also buy a condo, a $550,000 condo with just over 5% down. On the amount up to $500,000, you'd put 5% down, and then just on that $50,000 over $500, you'd have to put 10% down. So just about, you know, a $30,000 down payment, you could buy a condo, get into it, have that gap of ownership just be about $600-700 a month. And remember that you're banking equity for part of your mortgage payment. So really, when we look at the numbers in that scenario, I would have to say buying would be the better option if you have the down payment for it and if you can stomach that extra $500 to $700 a month in expenses. All right, scenario number 2, and this is a bit similar to what my wife and I did. So let's say you're buying a $1.1 million detached home in Toronto. You put 10% down, again, 4% mortgage rate, 30-year amortization. But what we do to offset some of the cost is we actually rent out our basement and we get $1,700 a month for that. So let's say your mortgage is $4,700 a month, property tax about $500 a month, insurance $200, puts your total ownership cost at about $5,300 or $5,400 a month. Now, if we take off that monthly basement rental, you get to a net monthly cost of about $3,600, $3,700 a month. And you own a detached home in Toronto. And in that scenario, you own a detached home in Toronto for less per month than some people pay in rent. And I've done 2-bedroom rentals this year where people are paying $3,600 a month for it. So it really is true, you can get a detached home. The big caveat with buying is just if you have that down payment available. So, you know, if you're putting 10% down on 1.1 million, your total closing costs are probably going to be close to $150,000 of cash with that down payment and with also your other closing costs, property tax, land transfer tax. But I can personally attest to the fact that it's a great way to start building equity in your home and to get your foot in the door for Toronto real estate, especially in this really buyer-favored market we have right now in the summer of 2026. You know, you can get a home inspection clause in there, you can get your financing clauses. We're generally not seeing 20, 30 offers on homes right now. So it's a great time. If you're thinking about it, reach out to me directly. All my contact info is on screen right now. So here's where I stand after 9 years of doing this in the GTA. Renting is definitely not a failure, but buying before you're ready can be. The best move is the one that matches your timeline, your finances, and your life, not what someone else thinks you should do or what they did when they were growing up. However, in my opinion, and I am a real estate agent after all, I think if you have at least a 5 to 7 year time window, buying does win out for building wealth and getting your foot into a Toronto market that has appreciated really well over the years. But tell me what you think. Do you think buying or renting is better in Toronto right now? Drop a comment, shoot me a text. All my info's on screen right now. If this video helped at all, hit the thumbs up and subscribe. New Toronto real estate videos every Tuesday and Friday. And if you have an idea for a video you want to see, drop a comment below. I had a cool comment about a video asking for Vaughan condos that I'm going to be working on in the future. I put out new Toronto real estate videos every Tuesday and Friday. My name's Jordan Abrams. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you around town.